Good afternoon, everyone. Happy Friday. Welcome to the Arts and Humanities COVID-19 Relief Fund webinar for organizations and groups. I'm Takinia, the Grants Director for the Arts and Humanities Council. I'm here with my fabulous colleagues, Karen Jetson, our Grants Manager, and Ana Alicia Fang, our Grants Assistant Manager. So today, here's how we're going to do this. I am going to go through the full slide deck. I'm going to describe why the fund opportunity exists, what you can do with the funds, etc. Ana Alicia will also, during this presentation, give you a helpful overview of the SM Apply portal that you'll have to use to submit your proposal, and if you receive an award, you will also use the portal to sign a grant agreement as well. So with that, I'll go ahead and begin.
That's strange. Give me 1 second.
No problem. Thank you, Ana Alicia. So here we have the agenda for the day, which is basically a more detailed version of what I just described to you. I should mention that you should feel free to enter your questions in the chat as I go through the presentation. And while I won't stop to answer those questions in the chat until the end of the presentation, you should feel free to use the chat whenever a thought comes to mind that you would like to share. Please select all, send a message to all when you use the chat. If you send a message to one specific person, like just to Karen or just to Ana Alicia, I won't see the question. So definitely select the all option. So here's the mission and the vision of the Arts and Humanities Council. I'm not going to read it verbatim. This is on our website, but know that we exist to support the vibrant multicultural creative sector that exists in a very large county. Montgomery County is the size of a small state. It's the size of Rhode Island. So there's a lot going on here culturally that we are delighted to support financially. Equity and inclusion is of prime importance to the Arts and Humanities Council. It's the crux of our goals for all of our funding opportunities. This statement is within all of our guidelines. And, you know, it's quite long. So again, I'm not going to read it verbatim. I do encourage all of you to make yourself familiar with this extensive statement. We want you all to keep in mind that there are historically underrepresented groups that have not been served extensively by the arts and the humanities sector. So we do want you all to think about in terms of the audiences that you target, the community that you aim to serve. Ask yourself the question, who's missing from our audiences? Who has unconsciously not been invited to the table? It's a question that we always ask ourselves in terms of how we can ensure that a diverse collective of applicants are encouraged to apply, but also to, as cultural organizations, please ask yourself those questions as you aim to serve a community that is beautifully multicultural and diverse. ADA compliance is interwoven into equity and inclusion. We don't see them as two separate statements. They're only separated for readability. This statement is, again, also in our guidelines. There's a hyperlink here that is active within our guidelines. We encourage you to click this link if you need ideas for how you can ensure that your offerings to the community are accessible. ADA compliance is of high importance, and know that if you were to use the COVID-19 relief funds for public programming, you are required to ensure that those public programs are ADA compliant. Always remember that ADA compliance is always an allowable cost within any of our funding opportunities. We are more than happy to help pay for your ADA compliance and your accessibility expenses. So we have resources on our website for how you know, various different types of organizations, regardless of discipline, regardless of whether you're arts or humanities, can amplify and heighten and make blatant diversity, equity, inclusion, and access. Please explore these resources when you have the time. If you have any questions about how you can ensure that DEIA is embedded into your internal and external goals, this is a subject that we're more than happy to discuss with you. So if you ever have any questions about DEIA, please don't hesitate to reach out to the Arts and Humanities staff. So the application deadline is right around the corner, folks. It's a little less than 3 weeks away. Please do whatever you need to do to remember this deadline, because we are not in a position to offer extensions for this funding opportunity. There are no exceptions to this rule. We highly encourage you not to start your application on the day of the deadline. That is very risky. Staff will not be able to help you with your application on September 16th, the day of the deadline. So know that if you start on the day of the deadline, you're on your own. If you run into a tech glitch, then you run the risk of missing the deadline. You don't want to be that anxious applicant who is still working at 11:58. You hit the submit button, you see that little spinning circle, which communicates that the system is trying to process your application, and then, oh, you missed the deadline because you started too late. Please don't put yourself in that position. This will be discussed in more detail later on in the presentation, but keep in mind that this funding opportunity is distinctly different from most of our other funding opportunities. It's a shorter application. It's very straightforward. So it should not take you as much time as the applications that are required for our standard grant making opportunities. You know, even with that though, even though it is a shorter application, please do not wait until the last minute to begin working in SM Apply. So this is also a distinct difference compared to our other funding opportunities. We will have to stop answering questions by 5:30 on September 9th. And while we are always more than happy to help applicants out, the reality is that we are juggling multiple funding opportunities. And so we're going to have to instate a shorter deadline for when we can answer questions for this funding opportunity, due to the fact that we are also juggling other funding opportunities that will be offered to the community. So while normally we will take questions up until the day before the deadline or the day of the deadline at 5:30, this unfortunately is something that we can't do for this funding opportunity. So this is another situation where I would suggest you do whatever you need to do to remember this date, set alarms in your calendar, because unfortunately, you know, on September 10th, you submit a question, unfortunately, we won't be able to help you out. So again, this is another signal that you should start your application as soon as possible, because very often what happens is that people may not realize they have questions until they begin working on their application. So begin it ASAP to ensure that you can send your questions to staff before this question deadline on September 9th at 5:30. So here's the process for how applications will be reviewed. I already stated the deadline. Staff will do an eligibility check. And, you know, when we offered this funding opportunity last year in partnership with Montgomery County, what we ended up doing is submitting a required report explaining who is eligible and who is not. Eligibility is always tied directly to our guidelines. So while I will discuss eligibility soon in greater detail, please know that this is explained blatantly in our guidelines. The guidelines are highly important. You should read the guidelines ideally more than once, just to make sure you have a strong understanding of the eligibility requirements. to ensure that you're actually able to get an award. So once the eligibility check is done, we will notify the public of the eligible applicants who can receive the COVID-19 relief funding. So I'm going to talk about the guidelines, which, as I just said, are highly important. So these awards exist to provide holistic financial support for our cultural organizations and groups. We know that the pandemic has been an incredibly financially challenging time for our sector. And so these awards can be used in various different ways. We want to make sure we're promoting stability in our cultural sector. We want to strengthen the scholarly and artistic capabilities of our organizations and groups that are housed in the county. And, we want to ensure that the management infrastructure, the organizational capacity of our applicants and grantees are fortified by receiving these funds. So these are general operating support grants, which is a beautiful thing. We know that you are the experts in understanding how you can use public funds to ensure that your work is mission aligned. You have the best understanding of your own emergency needs, where COVID has had the most dire impact on your finances. That's what you want to use this money for. It's designed to be an emergency fund for your pressing financial needs. So, as long as you are abiding by the rules and regulations that are listed in our guidelines, as long as you're an eligible applicant, you have a lot of freedom in the use of these funds. So, relief funds will be determined by the amount of funding that has been given to us by the Montgomery County government, the number of eligible applications received, and the size of an organization or group's allowable annual cash operating revenue or expenses prior to the COVID-19 pandemic, whichever is lower. In terms of eligibility, again, this is all listed in the guidelines, but please do read the guidelines even after attending this webinar. All entities, all organizations and groups are required to have an arts or humanities focused mission. You must be in operation for at least 12 months before the deadline with your primary location or verifiable mailing address in Montgomery County. Because we are using public funds given to us by local government, that means that we cannot support any organizations or groups that are primarily housed outside of the county. So if your organization is located in PG County or in DC or Virginia, unfortunately, we are not allowed to support you. You have to have been in operation in the county for at least 12 months before the deadline. There are no exceptions to this rule. You must operate as a nonprofit, even if you do not have 501c3 status. We know that some of the groups that apply to us do not have 501c3 status, and that is okay as long as you are operating like a nonprofit. We are not allowed to fund for-profit entities. And please note that you must be governed by a legally liable board of directors if you have 501c3 status. You also should maintain good standing with the state of Maryland. And in order to be eligible, you must have offered at least one public program or event in Montgomery County since 2019, and it can be an in-person or virtual event, either is fine. And again, as I mentioned earlier, it's required that all applicants are ADA compliant. So we do have some ways that I'll rephrase this. There are certain cash operating there's some cash operating revenue that is non-allowable in terms of budget eligibility. So unrealized gains or losses, investment revenues, in-kind donations, revenue raised for capital, funds intended for regranting. This is going to sound similar to the list that we have for some of our other funding opportunities for those of you who have received grants from us before. So this shouldn't be shocking. Other non-allowable cash operating expenses include investment fees, interest expenses. We cannot allow regranting, capital improvements, depreciation, loan principal payments, in-kind donations, and bad debt. If you have any questions about what counts as non-allowable cash operating expenses, Karen does an awesome job explaining budget eligibility. So do feel free to reach out to Karen if this list confuses you. We have some other limitations here in terms of eligibility. We cannot provide grants to public, private, or charter schools. The funding for the COVID-19 relief fund cannot be used for capital improvements, construction, or renovation projects. You can't use the funding for rental costs for Montgomery County owned facilities. You're not allowed to use our money to purchase real property. And also our funding cannot be used for fundraising activities or activities for the exclusive benefit of the organizations or groups members. All right, moving on. Other limitations include the cost of receptions, refreshments, or food. So let's say you're a visual arts applicant, you run a gallery, you normally have exhibition openings that have, nice hors d'oeuvres like wine and cheese. We can't pay for that. We can only pay for the other costs associated with your public programming, but not receptions, refreshments, food, alcohol. We can't pay for that. We can't pay for debt retirement, regranting, and we definitely cannot pay for political advocacy or activities that take a position regarding any one political party, candidate, or issue. We also cannot pay for any admin or programming costs incurred outside of Montgomery County, and we definitely cannot pay for travel outside of the United States. Again, if you've applied to us previously, this list will sound familiar. This is our standard list of limitations for general operating support. All right, so I've said this before, but it is highly important, which is why it's in big font, big bold font, and in red font. If you are intending to use these funds for public programming, the public programs must occur in Montgomery County and they have to be ADA compliant. And do remember that you're allowed to use our funding to pay for any expenses associated with accessibility. Unfortunately, we cannot make payments to fiscal sponsors through this funding opportunity. And do remember that if you need assistance or accommodation in order to complete the application, please contact our staff and please do so by September 9th at 5:30. Remember that deadline, folks, in terms of our limitations for how we can help you. So September 9th, 5:30. Last day that we can help you out with your application, work samples, etc. And do remember that these are emergency funds. So the funds must be spent by June 30th, 2023. This is not a funding opportunity that's designed for grants that are just supposed to sit around. This is an emergency fund. So do make sure that the funds are spent by June 30th, 2023. Okay, so I'm going to go over the application required materials. So obviously you need to fill out the full application in order to be deemed eligible. Please complete the full narrative, answer all the questions. There's a 501c3 check that's not applicable to groups, but groups again should remember that if you do not have 501c3 status, you still need to operate like a nonprofit. If you have any questions about that requirement, please do not hesitate to reach out to Karen Judson. Oh, I should say this, I'm sorry. So you'll see an email at the end of this, this webinar. Because we are juggling multiple funding opportunities, we actually request that you do not target a staff member directly. We actually have a separate email account for COVID-19 fund questions. So instead of contacting Karen directly, please send your emails and your questions to the COVID-19 Relief Fund email, which you'll see on a slide towards the end of the presentation. We have a demographic information form that we would like you to complete. This is stated in the application. Do remember that this form in no way impacts your eligibility at all. We are simply required to get demographic information from all of our applicants and grantees from our funders. Our funders would like to know who we serve. So that is the point of that form, but do know that it in no way impacts your eligibility. And all applicants are also required to upload a work sample. So do remember this, folks. It's why, again, we have this font in bold and why there's the red font here. We only have the capacity to look at 2 work samples. We're anticipating a very high number of applications. So please try to choose the best work samples that you have access to. But it can't be more than 2 work samples. I know that if you disregard this rule and decide, I want to upload 4 work samples, we won't be able to look at the additional work samples. So we'll look at the first 2 and whatever else is in SM Apply will be disregarded. So 2 work samples. Know that if you are a grantee, a current grantee, and you've already submitted work samples this year for a previous funding opportunity, if you feel that those are your strongest work samples and you want to submit the same work samples, that's perfectly fine. Don't feel like you have to recreate the wheel. But again, 2 work samples that must be no more than 2 files or 2 pages total for images or written work. The work samples obviously should reflect the primary discipline that your organization, or disciplines plural, that your organization provides to the community. And, also keep in mind that work samples that exceed the stated limits will not be reviewed, as I just previously said. This is also an opportunity where we're actually not taking supplementary materials. I know plenty of you are used to uploading both work samples and supplementary materials for our other funding opportunities. But again, this is not the same funding opportunity. It's distinctly different. This is actually designed to be low admin burden for applicants because it's emergency funding. So do not submit supplementary materials. If you do, they will not be reviewed, right? So these are intentionally supposed to be short applications with not a lot of attachments so that we can figure out eligibility quickly and keep the ball rolling. So, pay attention closely to these limitations that are listed in our guidelines. Again, images, a maximum of 2 pages. If you upload a PDF and it's 4 pages, we'll look at the first 2 pages and then trash the other 2 pages. So, again, abide by these limitations here. No more than 2 videos, maximum of 5 minutes combined, no more than 2 audio files, a maximum of 5 minutes combined, and for written work, no more than 2 pages. As we always say, if you do not have the capabilities to edit your work samples, let's say you have a play and you have that play is online on YouTube and you do not have the capabilities to shorten the recording of that play, that is totally fine. Just provide directions to us. You can upload a PDF with directions if you wish and explain where we should look. So you can tell us to fast forward to a certain time and stop watching at a certain time so that you're abiding by the time limitations. You can do the same thing with audio, give us directions, tell us when we should stop listening so that the work sample does not go beyond 5 minutes. If you have any questions about work samples, feel free to send an email to the COVID-19 Relief Fund account, and we'll be happy to help you out. So, it's up to you if you want to upload a file or submit a link. Either way is fine. Very often links are the easiest way to approach this. So the SM Apply link only supports links to YouTube and Vimeo. If you want to use another platform, you would have to upload a PDF with an embedded link. Please make sure that you do not upload work samples that are password protected. You need to make sure that staff can see the work sample quickly. Be very careful about this because, again, we have limited time to review these proposals. So don't put yourself in the situation where you upload a work sample and it's password protected and staff can't access it. That'll kick you out of the pool. You'll be deemed ineligible. So do test your work sample and make sure that it works, that it's accessible, so that you're not kicked out, because we will not have the time to contact you after the deadline to ask you to fix your work sample. We're not in a position to do this for that funding opportunity. So make sure it works. If you are nervous about tech and making sure that your work sample is actually viewable, what I would encourage you to do is upload your work samples well in advance. So upload your work samples before September 9th, and you can always send us an email and ask us to test a work sample to make sure that we can view it. That's the safest way to approach this, because after September 9th, again, we won't be able to help you out with work samples or any other aspects of the application itself. So I already stated this, but check to make sure that your links are not broken if you upload a link or if you have a link in a PDF. And do make sure that the link is viewable, does not require a password. And I mentioned this earlier, that you can provide directions to us if your video or audio surpasses the required time limitations that are listed in the guidelines. All right, so I'm going to pass the baton over to my colleague, Ana Alicia, and she will guide you through SM Apply.
Thank you, Takenia. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Ana Alicia Fang, and I'm the Grants Assistant Manager here at the Council. I will be going through these slides for SurveyMonkey Apply, which we refer to SM Apply for short, which is our online grants portal where you will be submitting your application and work samples. So we do recommend using either Google Chrome or Firefox for best performance. The links to access SM Apply are up on the slide. There are also a few other places you can find these links. You can find them in the guidelines and also on our website. If you go to the COVID Relief Fund page on our website and you toggle over to the tab that says Apply, in big font, you should see text that says Ready to Apply. Click here to access the grants portal, and that will take you exactly where you need to go. Just for reference, if you're completely new to us, this is what the grants portal page looks like. You'll be using the login or register buttons in the upper right-hand corner. Returning users obviously can go ahead and log in. If you, by chance, have used Fluid Review with us before, that was our previous grants portal, you can actually just use the same email and password without having to create a new account. However, if you are completely new to the Arts and Humanities Council and to SM Apply, just go ahead and click register, enter in all the required fields to get started on your new account. Again, for new users, you'll be getting an account confirmation email. Please follow all the steps to confirm your email address and set up your account. Once you do, you'll receive a second follow-up email, again, just letting you know that you are successfully registered. The reason this is so important is because if you do not completely verify your account, you will not have access to the submit button. Bit of a problem if you want to submit an application. So if for any reason you're unsure if your account has been verified, At the top of your, whenever you try to log in, you'll actually get a message that says your email address hasn't been verified. Please resend verification link. And that's a good indicator of whether your account has been verified or not. Just running through some account settings, again, for those of us who are new to SM Apply. All account settings can be found by clicking on your name in the upper right-hand corner and then clicking on the option that says My Account. There are 3 different account settings, those being your profile, notifications, and eligibility. In your profile, that's where you can edit your name, your email, your time zone. Please make sure you're in the correct time zone. Notifications are really up to your preference. We just ask that you keep the 1st and 4th notification preferences checked. We must be able to reach you through our portal. And then lastly is the eligibility setting, which will make more sense in a second. So the eligibility profile is something that all SM Apply users will need to do, and it really only prompts you to do it as a new user. So if you're returning, you've already filled this out and you don't need to do this again. But new users, in order to view programs, will need to fill out this profile. And this profile is really just to gather whether you're interested in applying as an individual, organization, or group, and it's for our general programs. So like I said, it's just a simple form. It asks you what you're interested in applying as, and you can choose as many options as apply to you. Maybe you're an individual and you are thinking about applying as an individual, and you also work for an organization and you anticipate writing grants on their behalf. You can check both, and if your situation changes, you can go into your account settings and edit your response. Once new users finish that eligibility profile, they can go ahead and click on Programs in the upper right-hand corner or the green View Programs button to see which available opportunities we have. If you are a returning user, all you have to do is click Programs in the upper right-hand corner to see what opportunities we have. And right now we should only have one, which is the COVID-19 Relief Fund. It should be the only box on the page. So go ahead and click the green More button. And on the next page, which is just a short overview, go ahead and click the green Apply button. Just enter in the name of the organization or group that you're applying on behalf of and click Create Application. That will take you to your application or submission homepage, which will have all of the required tasks that you'll have to do before being able to submit. And at this point, I am going to switch to a bit of a live demonstration so that we can go through the application together. So initially, when you start an application, the only task that you'll see is called Start Here. And this is specific to the COVID-19 Relief Fund. It's again asking you, are you interested in applying as an individual or on behalf of an organization or group? And once you select your answer, then this left-hand side will populate with tasks that are specific to your category. So as you go through the application, if you see language that seems like it's more appropriate for individual artists or scholars, make sure that you've selected organization/group in this Start Here task. Or if you have selected organization/group and you still see something that looks amiss, please let us know and we would be happy to help. Moving on to the actual application form, or actually before I do that, on this left-hand side, again, you can see all of the tasks that you'll be working through, and you'll notice that some of them have a circle that's not filled in, one that's half filled in, and one that has a check mark. And this indicates which tasks are not started, in progress, and completed. Please know that all required tasks, which are marked with an asterisk, will need to be completed in order to be able to submit. So working through this application form, really the most important part of this are the eligibility questions. Like Dakinia said, this is a really straightforward application. It's not being reviewed by panel. It's really just, do you meet eligibility or not? So if you have any questions about these eligibility requirements, please let us know and we'd be happy to talk about them. Again, anything that's required will be marked with an asterisk, and that means that you have to answer that question before being able to move on to the next page. And also know that any text responses have a maximum character count that includes spaces. So for example, in this response down here, it right now counts 4 characters. And if I were to type in a bunch of spaces, it counts those as well. So if you're working on your responses offline, in a Word document, in a Google Doc, etc., please make sure that you're looking at the character count that includes spaces. And just to show you what I mean when I say that it will not let you move on, if I try to click next, it'll tell me my form contains errors. And as I scroll through my answers, it should let me know which is the question that I have not answered. So once you've entered in some text, you can go ahead and click next onto the second and last page of this application form. So these questions are really just to gather data about your experience with COVID-19 from January 1st through June 30th. Please answer these questions to the best of your ability. And again, please let us know if you have any questions about this. At the bottom of this page, you'll see that instead of next, it now says mark as complete, which means you've reached the end of the form. And the only thing left after answering all the required questions is marking as complete. When you do so, it will turn the form into a PDF-like document that you will not be able to edit. However, if you do have something you want to change, look for these 3 dots in the upper right-hand corner, click on them, click edit, and it will take you to the last page of your form. If you have something you want to change on the first page of the form, please scroll to the bottom and use the previous button. Please do not use the back button of your browser because that will not take you where you want to go. If you use previous, it'll take you to the first page. You can go ahead and make your edit. However, please do remember that after you make any edits, you do have to mark your form as complete again. So after making your change, click next, scroll to the bottom, and mark as complete one more time. Moving on to the 501c3 check. This is not required for groups. So again, if this pops up for you and you are a group without 501c3 status, please let us know and we can help. You may receive a pop-up that I just exited out of that says, you've completed this task before. That really applies if you've applied to our other funding opportunities. You're more than welcome to reuse that data. If you don't want to reuse that data, you can just type in your EIN here and click verify. I am going to reuse data. It'll populate it for you, and then remember you must mark as complete. So every task, regardless of whether it's an application form, a status check, or a work sample, has a mark as complete button. And similarly, once a task has been marked as complete and you want to edit it, you do have to look for these 3 dots, click edit, make your change, and then mark as complete once again. Takinia already touched on the demographic information form. This does not factor into eligibility in any way. It's really just for our own reporting purposes requested from our funders. So please fill this out to the best of your ability. Last but not least, we have the work sample. Again, this application is not being reviewed by a panel. This is just to give staff an idea of what it is you do. What are 2 good examples of what it is you do? And again, 2, no more than 2. So please read these instructions. They really go into depth about like file sizes, how many files, etc. Attaching a file, pretty straightforward. It'll bring up your computer's file manager, select your file, and it will appear at the bottom here. If you want to link a video from YouTube or Vimeo, you can use this link to video feature. It'll bring up a pop-up where you can enter in your link. You can name your video. You can add in instructions such as please watch from 33 seconds to 2 minutes in. And you can click OK. Before I move on from this, please make sure that you're using the full link address. So go to the top of your browser and copy that link. If you use the YouTube share button, it gives you a shorthand link, and SM Apply does not accept that. So just give your link a try. If you're having trouble, let us know and we can help you out. But do remember to try and use the full link. And again, whenever you add a work sample, it'll appear at the bottom. If you want to edit or remove any of these, just use these 3 dots on the right-hand side. Once you're done, mark as complete. And at this point on the left-hand side, you'll see that all of my required tasks are marked as complete, and I have the option to review and submit. Going back to the submission homepage, just so that you can see it in a different window. Again, all my tasks are complete, and the submit button is bright and green and ready to be clicked. When you go to submit your application, just confirm that you want to submit, and it will let you know that you should be receiving a confirmation email. If you do not receive this email, please let us know, honestly, as soon as possible. These emails don't take long to go through, and we can confirm on our end whether we've received your application. Please know that if your tasks are complete, but you did not click submit, unfortunately, we can't view your application. It doesn't register as being submitted and can't be added to the pool of applicants. So again, please look out for this confirmation email. It's a good peace of mind, just to make sure that you've submitted your application. If by any chance you need to make any edits to your application, you can click from this page, you can click on go to my applications, or if it's a new day, you can click on my applications in the upper right-hand corner the next time you log in. Go ahead and find your submission. It should just be a box that says FY23 Arts and Humanities COVID-19 Relief Fund. It should say submitted. Go ahead and click on view. And from there, you can click into any of the tasks that you want to edit. Again, when you click into a task, it is marked as complete. So you'll have to use the 3 dots in the corner, click edit, make your change, and mark as complete once again. And you can do all this up until the date and time of the deadline. Takinia has been saying this throughout the entire webinar, but please remember that staff will not be answering questions after Friday, September 9th at 5:30. So if you're working on this application late the day of the deadline and something happens, you have a tech question, unfortunately, we will not be able to help. So we do encourage you to take advantage of being able to submit and then make edits later. It'll really help if you have any tech questions at all. We'll be able to answer them, and then you can peacefully work on it until the deadline. So with that, I will pass it back to Takinia.
Thank you so much, Annalicia, for that very helpful overview of SM Apply. So we will announce all eligible applications, announce who is going to receive an award in October of this year. So we will be able to pay all of our recipients in full once we have received the required agreement from all eligible applicants. For groups, we'll need a signed W-9 form, including the group's social security number or employer identification number. We'll also need all awardees to submit a required bill.com form, and you'll be required to create a bill.com account. Obviously, if you already have an account, if you are already a grantee, an Arts and Humanities Council grantee, you won't have to create a bill.com account. But for those of you who are new to receiving funds from the Arts and Humanities Council, we do not mail checks. We can only submit payment electronically through bill.com. So do keep this in mind. If you are in any way uncomfortable with creating a bill.com account and receiving funds through bill.com, then I would suggest that you don't apply, because this is the only way that we can send funding to you. We cannot make exceptions and mail out checks. And honestly, folks, this is the safest way for us to get funds to the community. The mail is still not very reliable. Checks can get stolen. And bill.com is a verified, it's a verified portal that is used by a number of businesses. So do trust and feel comfortable with the reality that this is a safe way to get funding to all of our recipients. And importantly, we cannot send out funds to the community until we receive funding from the Montgomery County government. We sincerely appreciate your patience while we wait for funding. While we have been confirmed, obviously, that we will be given the emergency funds to transmit to the public, we have actually not received those funds yet. So hopefully we will have the funds in hand by the end of October. Again, this is not a process that is within our control. So we do appreciate your patience, but hopefully they will give us the funding by the end of October. All right, some important reminders. Please, please, please do not wait until the last minute to start your application. I know that I've said this repeatedly, Alicia has stated it, but it is highly important, folks, because again, the last day that we are able to help you with any of your questions is September 9th at 5:30. If you start your application right before the deadline and you run into tech issues, you're on your own. If you come across a question on the application you don't understand, you're on your own. If there's some requirement in the guidelines you don't understand, then you're on your own. So please don't put yourself in this position. Alicia already mentioned this, but the wonderful thing about SM Apply is that you can hit the submit button early. Please hit the submit button early. And then if you realize later, oh my gosh, I wanted to add a couple of sentences to answer one of the questions, or you think to yourself, actually, you know what? I think I have a stronger work sample than what I uploaded. I'd like to swap out a different work sample. You can still do that. You can make whatever edits you need to make after you hit the submit button, as long as you hit the submit button before the deadline and as long as you make your edits before the deadline. Please don't forget to hit the submit button. I know that Alicia mentioned this already, but it's really important because it's always heartbreaking to us when we get a message from an applicant past the deadline who asked if we received our application and the applicant just forgot to hit the submit button. So please make sure that you hit it. Please do read the instructions in SM Apply very carefully, read the guidelines carefully. If you have any questions about instructions in the guidelines or SM Apply, please don't hesitate to contact us by 5:30 on September 9th, which is next Friday, folks. So that's right around the corner. So please start your applications now if you have not done so yet. So applications must be submitted through SM Apply. There are no exceptions to the rule. Please do not mail the application. Please do not knock on our office door and try to hand deliver an application. Please do not email the application. We can only accept applications and work samples through SM Apply. Make sure that you have answered all the questions to ensure that you are eligible and that your application is not disregarded. And as I've said before, we cannot accept any late applications. There are no exceptions to this rule. So again, this is a different opportunity compared to our standard grant categories. So instead of contacting staff directly, my apologies for stating earlier in the webinar that you should contact Karen specifically for financial questions. The best way to ensure that your questions are answered promptly is to not contact staff through their individual email addresses. Please use this COVID-19 Relief Fund email account. This is the only place where you should send your questions. It is the easiest way for staff to keep track of the different questions that we're getting for different funding opportunities. So also keep in mind that unfortunately, we are not in a position to take phone calls for this funding opportunity. Again, this is a different grant opportunity. We're expecting a very high number of applications. So due to our capacity, we can only respond to emails submitted to the COVID-19 Relief Fund email address listed here. And unfortunately, we are not able to review drafts for this funding opportunity. But again, the beautiful thing is that this is a straightforward form, straightforward application. So hopefully it will not be challenging at all for all of you to fill out this form and to upload your work samples. And I'll say this one more time. For grantees who have already submitted approved applications, if you wanted to submit the same work samples that you've already submitted for your most recently approved application, there is nothing wrong with doing that. That is totally fine. So here's our fabulous staff listed here. Again, please do not send questions directly to an individual, though. Please send your questions to this email address here, COVID-19 Relief Fund at creativemoco.com. And with that, I'm going to make time for any questions that have not been answered yet. I'm taking a look at the chat. Karen, it looks like you tackled the questions in the chat. Am I correct?
Yes, I've been trying to. There are a lot of questions about what the grant award amounts will look like. So I've been trying to explain that that depends on the number of applications we get and the financial information that's submitted. I don't know if you want to add anything to that.
Yeah, Karen summed it up, folks. Again, this is not like our other funding opportunities. We are not in a position to provide estimates of what the award amounts will be, because we really have no idea how many applications we're going to receive. So, again, we appreciate your patience, and I'm sorry that I cannot give you a more detailed answer for what award amounts may be, but we're not sure. I will say this, we did get less funding from Montgomery County for emergency relief compared to the previous round that we offered to the community. So you may want to keep that in mind, that there is a high likelihood that if you received funding previously through the earlier round of emergency grants that we offer to the community, anticipate that your grants will probably be a little bit lower. But again, I can't give you a detailed estimate for what the amount may be, because we have no idea how many eligible applications we will receive. I don't want that to deter you from applying, though. Please make sure that you do apply. Obviously, even if your award is slightly less than it was last year, that's definitely better than not getting emergency funding at all. So please make the time to submit the application regardless, even if you're, not able to plan on an exact amount that you will receive. That's the best that we can do.
We also have some
go ahead.
About regarding budget eligibility, about what we consider pre-COVID.
Right. So pre-COVID is before 2020. So know that we think that in terms of equity, it doesn't make sense to use budgets use budgets that you had during the pandemic, when most entities experienced a significant amount of financial loss. So, 2020 and, 2021, 2022 current year, those financials won't be used. It's before the pandemic occurred. So if you want to know how much money was previously funded through the COVID-19 relief fund for the previous round, know that you can go to our website. You can actually see the amounts that were given out for any of our funding opportunities going pretty far back. We always, every year, publish a list of our grantees, the amount of money each grantee received according to the funding opportunities. So you can do a deep dive with any of our funding opportunities, including the COVID-19 Relief Fund, by going to our website within the grants section of our website. And you can see, how much money was given out for previous emergency relief funding or any of our funding opportunities. I'm going through, it looks like a number of questions have come through and I'm not sure, trying to see which ones Karen answered and what she didn't have the time to.
Takenia, there's a question about if you've become a nonprofit since 2020. How do you address pre-COVID numbers?
Yeah, you know what? I would suggest that this applicant submit a detailed question to the email address that we provided, the COVID-19 email address. We may need to have a more detailed discussion with you. Remember that it is not a requirement to have 501c3 status for this funding opportunity. So if this is a situation where an applicant was a group and then, got their 501c3 status recently, but you have financial data for when you were a group, we can use that data if that makes sense. But this seems like it's I would suggest you submit this question to the COVID-19 Relief Fund email address, and we'll work with you individually to sort out your financial questions.
We also have a question asking, to what extent do applicants need to show specific COVID-related needs and emergency needs? I'm assuming that refers to when they're answering how they will use the funds.
Okay, folks, just describe in your application the financial detriment that COVID-19 caused your organization or group, why you need the funding, and how the funds will be used. So it's just narrative responses. That's all I can say. Again, this is intended to be a low admin burden form. So as long as you're clear in your narrative responses, you're good to go. So I hope that makes sense. So let's say you're an organization, this is a random hypothetical, and you've discovered that you want to continue virtual programming. And let's say you figured out, okay, in order to amp up our virtual programming, we need to put more money into tech. Go ahead and explain in your answer that you need to use this relief funding to amplify your tech needs to ensure that your virtual programming is of high quality. Or let's say you need to use this money to ensure that you can sustain a portion of a staff member's salary, or let's say you need this money to make sure that your upcoming program is fully accessible. The beautiful thing about general operating support is that you have a lot of leeway for how you want to use the funds. Just make it clear to us, what aspects of your work have been the most impacted by the pandemic. How has the pandemic caused you financial harm? And then explain clearly how you'll use the funds. I hope that answers your question. If it doesn't, feel free to submit a more detailed question to the COVID-19 Relief Fund email address. Okay, I'm going to look through the questions to see if I've missed any. Okay, folks, so I think at this point, it's 3 o'clock. I thank you so much for coming today. I think, okay, it looks like Karen answered a question in the chat. I'll give you all a couple more minutes, but otherwise know that you can submit any additional questions you may have to the COVID-19 Relief Fund email address that's been provided through this webinar. Again, this is a straightforward form, but we're more than happy to help you. Please make sure that you submit your questions no later than September 9th at 5:30. I'll give you all another minute before I get off the Zoom. All right, folks, thank you so much for attending today. We look forward to getting your applications. Please start your applications as soon as possible. And with that, I hope you enjoy the little bit that's left of the summer. Have a lovely week. Take care all. Bye-bye.